Hello and welcome to Thrive in Life show, and this is your host Zaheen Nanji. Well, I'm so excited today because we're going to talk about happiness and the pathway to a happier life. And I've been noticing lately that in the last few weeks or so that the articles that are coming out in Inc.com and BuzzFeed and all those great, websites that have articles like that talk about happiness a lot. So is this something that we are craving for somehow? For me, I find that happiness is so abstract and elusive. It's like this thing out there. But we have a great guest with us who will try to bring it down to a more, I find, kind of stable level, or a level that we can understand what happiness is all about. Okay, so I'm your host, Zaheen Nanji. And if you missed the last episode, well, I'll tell you, you missed a good one. But my hunch is that you'll want to go and check it out. So go to my website that you see here, zaheennanji.com. And the last episode, which was number 20, we talked about the 10 traits of highly successful and productive people. Again, you've been seeing a lot of information out there about that, but we broke it down for you into 10 traits, and we even gave you some tips. So my host, Kathy, couldn't join us today because she's in Florida. So I'm here, but hey, we're still going to have a good show, and she will join us in April. And then episode number 19, which I'm sure you'll want to know about, is how to create a morning routine. I get asked that a lot. Zaheen, how do you get up at 4:30 in the morning and get things done? I just want to hit the snooze button and go back to bed. Well, I did that too, but I'll show you a way of how I stopped doing that and got things done in 2 hours in the morning so that I could do what the world demanded of me after that. So here we go. We are going to talk about 12 pathways to a happier life. But before I do that, so Maryann is right here with me. I'm just going to do a little bio on her, show you her book, and then we'll go into the questions that I have for her. Okay. So Maryann, by the way, is here because she lives in the same town I do, and we thought this would be a good way to have her here and share the screen with me and kind of make it a conversation like you see on TV. Okay, so that's what we're doing today. So Maryann Da Silva is a registered social worker. She has worked with survivors of abuse, teen moms, and children and families at risk, and young offenders. And she has had a lifelong learning. She loves reading all these books that I love reading too. And we met a couple of years ago actually at a New Year's Eve party, and we just hit it off right away. So I'm so glad that that we became friends. Right, Maryann?
Absolutely.
Okay. So she graduated from the University of Alberta with a Bachelor of Art degree and a major in psychology. And then she received her diploma in social work. She also struggled with high self-esteem, but she'll talk about that in her book that I'm going to show you at the moment. And she's going to also talk about that right now. And then she goes through trial and error in her life, and I loved reading her book because it shows a part of her that I didn't even know, and I really like that about her. So she lives in Alberta, Canada, the same town I'm in, Wetaskiwin, with her husband Alex and her two kids, Madison and Zachary, and their dog Yoda. Love that name. So welcome, Maryann.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me on your show.
Oh, no problem. I'm just going to show the book here. So it's Coping with the Ordinary and Making Life Extraordinary, 12 Pathways to a Happier Life. So, Maryann, I have so many questions for you, and I love reading your book. So what made you decide to write a book on self-esteem and happiness?
Well, it really calls to me. I've talked to a lot of people who really have voiced that they want to increase their self-esteem, bring more self-confidence, have more self-confidence, I should say, and bring more happiness into their lives. And I've really noticed that that has been what a lot of people are searching for. And in the past, I've ran support groups, educational support groups, and sometimes we have a hard time getting people and as participants. We ran a self-esteem group, and that filled up within a week and a half, and unfortunately we had to turn people away. So it just goes to show there is definitely a need out there.
Right.
And everybody wants to be happy.
Yes.
You know, contrary to what people feel, that, you know, that expensive house or boat or winning the lottery, although, you know, I certainly wouldn't refuse that, but those things don't really bring happiness long term.
It's interesting that you say that, because in fact there was a video that they showed on Facebook that I actually saw it, but it's about all these actors out there that are saying to all of us that, you know, yeah, we have the expensive houses and we have the expensive cars, but that is not making us fulfilled.
Yes.
What we do makes us fulfilled. And it was interesting too that I had a client this morning that I was coaching, and she was telling me about her life and how she came to a time in her life where she thought, I don't feel worthy, because she was a stay-at-home mom. She did what she was supposed to do, look after her kids. And we as women have this trend going in our head, or the mentality that others come first and we come last, right? If you're a woman, say yes.
Yes.
You know. So and she said that a time came where she just had to talk to her husband and say, I can't do this anymore. I need to feel good about myself. And as soon as she started doing that, she said, now life, I'm just feeling so happy.
Yes.
About everything that is happening in my life.
And when you feel happy, others can feel happy around you, and it's just giving a perfect message to your children as well.
Yes, wonderful. Okay, so tell me, why did you call the book Coping with the Ordinary and Making Life Extraordinary? How did you come up with the title?
Well, actually, when I first started writing, that wasn't the initial title that I envisioned. At first, it was called Getting the Green Light to Self-Esteem and Happiness.
Getting the green light. I like that.
And as a first-time author, I sought feedback and wanting to know what my friends, colleagues, and other authors thought of the title. And so I would bounce different titles off of them and getting some input and advice. And as I began writing more, it just seemed that that was the title that was more fitting. And searching for happiness kind of seemed more to me like going on different pathways as opposed to getting stuck in traffic.
And so is that why you have the subtitle as 12 Pathways to Happier Life?
Yes,
that's what you're saying about the pathways to happiness.
That's correct. Okay. And there are 12 that I talk about in my book.
Yes, and I like the way you put each chapter as, chapter 1 is the first pathway, chapter 2 is the second pathway, and I love that. So, and I think it's good because, what if I want to learn, like, pathway number 5 or 6? I don't have to go to 1, 2, 3, right?
That's correct.
Okay.
They're not sequential.
Okay.
And so you don't have to achieve one in order to work at the next one.
Okay.
However, they are very interrelated. And when you start to work on one, it really does have a snowball effect in the sense that other good things happen.
Right.
Much like throwing a stone in a still pond, you get that rippling effect.
Yes.
And I find even with my book, there are some days that I feel really down. I'll grab it, read the chapter that I need to, just to give myself that pick-me-up.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. That's good. And I do want to talk about the way that you have laid out your book, because I think that's very smart, but we'll come to that later. Because first I want to go through the 12, pathways that she has. And what we'll do is, just because of the time that we have, we'll go through 3 and then pick one, and we'll, talk about that. Okay, so the first three that she has is know and love thyself, develop a mental health practice. That's number two. And number three is take risks. I love that. Take risks. So why don't we talk about how to develop a mental health practice? Because I think that the word mental health, a lot of people have different ideas about mental health. So if you can explain the listeners on the podcast and the viewers, what does mental health mean to you, and how can they start to develop a practice around that?
Mental health to me means taking care of your emotional well-being.
Mm-hmm.
And there are a number of ways of doing that. I find that is so very important, and looking at those important self-care strategies, which could be stress busters,
Mm-hmm.
ways of pampering yourself,
Mm-hmm.
ways of doing activities that you enjoy doing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really important to have a lot of those in your toolbox.
Okay, perfect. So then to give you an example, something that I do, I find that especially if I do yoga, and I just do that once a week because that's all I can do right now. I find that after that, I just feel so calm. And is that something that you would say is a mental health practice, because it really calms my mind down?
Oh, for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And what about things like meditation? Like they say that really helps as well.
Yep, anything that you do that helps you to feel better about yourself, meditation, yoga. I personally like to run on the treadmill. If I can get myself to the gym and do that after it really makes a world of difference.
It does. Yeah, good. And when I was talking about the morning routines in the morning, and people ask me, why do you get up at 4:30? Well, because I find that time for me is so serene, and it's me time, and that's when I just sit down on the floor and close my eyes and just meditate with each breath. And I find that really helps me. And that's my everyday practice that keeps me going. And I would highly recommend that you start somewhere just with that.
And even if you don't have tons of time, just take those 5 minutes and make yourself a nice cup of tea and put your feet up.
Another thing that I heard from someone was the 5 minutes that you take to wash dishes is so, like, there's nothing to think about. It's just your hands being in the soapy water and the suds and feeling them. That in itself is just meditation, I think. And I heard that and I thought, yes, that's how I feel when I wash dishes.
Yes.
Okay. So let's go to the next three here. And the next three are: focus on your behavior and not the outcomes, round up a posse, and the third one is stand strong on your own. So let's talk about round up a posse, because I'm intrigued about that, and I'm sure the viewers and listeners are as well. So tell us more about that.
Well, I came up with the title of it's important for everybody to have a support system of people that are your go-to people that you can rely on for support. Much as a sheriff pulls people towards helping him and supporting him, and I think that's really important, especially when you are going through those troubled times where a person feels like they're all alone. And a good friend to me one time said, well, you have your own posse. You have people in your corner. And that was a wonderful thing and just what I needed to hear at the time.
Wow. Okay. And that's true. And you'll find a lot of successful people, or even people who I find get through, right? Have the network around them, whether it's family, extended family, or just friends, that they have that support system. Okay, so the next three. So let me just recap the first six for you, just in case if you are joining us right now, and for those of you listening on the podcast, just so you know, we do the show on Google Hangout, which gets recorded on YouTube, and then we turn this into a podcast that you can listen on iTunes and Stitcher. So if I say viewers and listeners, I am talking to people on my Hangout show and on my podcast. So let's just recap the first 6. Know and love thyself. Develop a mental health practice. Take risks. That's huge. And I find that a lot of us do not take risks because of the fear of failure, rejection, anything along those lines. And I'll say, just do it. Think about Nike and just do it. Okay. Focus on your behavior and not the outcome. Round up a posse and stand strong on your own. Those are amazing in itself. And I know you're thinking, how can I get that book? Well, we'll tell you. Just hang in there. Okay, so the next 3 are finding a mentor, dealing with setbacks, and dare to dream. So why don't we talk about dealing with setbacks? Because I think that's huge for the viewers and listeners and for anyone out there, is how do you deal with setbacks?
That's really difficult, and that's really a challenge. And so that's why I wanted specifically to write a chapter about that. And a lot can be said for motivation and keeping up with that motivation.
Yes.
And part of it is, what are you telling yourself when you're doing this? You know, what sort of messages are you giving yourself? Are you saying, oh, this is too hard, this is too scary, I can't do this? Or are you telling yourself, you know what, this is what it is a setback. Mm-hmm. And as a setback, I can succeed and I can make it. There's an excellent quote, one of my favorite quotes in the book that I use by Maryann Da, and she says, courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes it's that quiet voice at the end of the day that says, I will try again tomorrow.
Oh, I love that quote. Yes. Courage is not a roar. It's just a whisper.
Doesn't always roar.
Doesn't always roar.
Sometimes it's that quiet voice at the end of the day
that just whispers, try again. I love that. And remember that, because I think we all need to know that. And I think it was Jack Canfield who had it in one of his books that says that there is no failure, there's only setbacks. And I think he got that from probably all the people before him who tried and tried and tried and got there. Like everyone talks about the light bulb guy, Thomas Edison, right? Like he failed 999 times and then 1,000 times. And he has a quote of his own that, what if I didn't try the other hundreds and hundreds of times, you know, which is true, right? So courage is not a roar. I love that. And so if someone has a failure, right, and they're just down in the dumps and they're feeling so low, what could they do, or what could they say to themselves to get back up and get going again? Is there something that I know with me, I really have to talk to myself, or I talk to someone who I know is my mentor, who will, you know, pick me up again. So I like the chapter that you have about find a mentor. But what would you say to someone?
What do you do when defeat is at your doorstep?
Yeah.
Well, I think it's important to realize when it happens, and I do say when, not if, because it does happen in everybody's life. And the most important thing is to recognize when you're starting that downward spiral, when things aren't going your way.
To recognize that first.
To recognize it and to reach out for help and to seek people who will be inspiring for you and who will give you those encouraging messages and be there for you. And remember that there are several people who, like you say, Thomas Edison and a number of other people who have tried and tried again.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, so we're at the last 3 in the book. And the last 3 are find a purpose in pain. Let me repeat that. Find a purpose in pain. Have faith. And have an attitude for gratitude. So I want to say to you that I love the one that you say, find a purpose in pain, because, you know, usually I say, make your mess into a message. And the reason I say that is that I got that from one of my mentors too. where she turned her mess into her message, and I did the same. And for those of you who know my story, I stuttered up until my 20s, and I still stutter here and there, even though you can't tell. But it doesn't bother me anymore because I'm out of that comfort zone. Like, I don't have the emotional charge that I used to. But that's because I found a purpose in that pain, and the purpose was to help others find their voice.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of want to talk about that because I'm sure that there's other women out there, and I know we say women because I and you can kind of understand what they're going through, and we talked about how we feel that others come first and we come last, things like that. But we're changing that mentality that we're all there to help each other and be equal. So, what would you say about that? Find a purpose in pain.
I think that sometimes it's really hard to find a purpose in pain, but if you can really explore that and have it be a purpose, much like in your case where you inspire other women and help them to find their voice, then it kind of helps things to fit and to make sense. Pain does have a number of different purposes. It really connects people with their humanity and makes us human and be able to relate to each other. I think if we didn't have that, we'd be pretty superficial people.
Yes, and I say that there's always two sides to a coin, right? And I say, so you can't have fear without courage, and you can't have courage without fear, right? I think it's same with happiness and pain, really. You can't have happiness without pain and pain without happiness because you wouldn't know what it feels like then.
It's relative,
Right.
And if you don't experience one, then you can't enjoy the benefits of the other.
Yeah. So light and dark, day and night, like it all has to be there. It's all part of life. Okay, so in your book, you also talk about, ways we can come out of our comfort zone.
Yes.
So what are some of those ways to push ourselves outside of our comfort zone?
Well, actually right now, because this is my first podcast interview, I feel a little out of my comfort zone.
Okay, there you go. You're doing awesome. You're doing really good, right?
But yeah, and I think people like to challenge themselves and try to be the best that they can be. I think of New Year's resolutions and how we all start off with really good intentions and buy that gym membership or go on that diet, which is really hard to sustain. In my book, I talk about one challenge a month. And so it's only one challenge a month, and it doesn't have to be anything big. It just has to mean something to you.
Right.
So something that takes you out of that comfort zone.
Yes.
And
nice. I just started a course called Thrive in Life, and one of the ladies that joined the course, that was one of the things, was just start with one habit that you can keep on doing and sustaining. And she started running.
Yes.
And she said she never used to do that. And well, she did before, but she gave it up, and she goes that she started again. So the course was a good way for her to get going again. And then I told her, but don't stop when the course is done. Let's talk about how you can continue on. So
yes.
So that is great. What I like is one thing a month. And it doesn't have to be big, right? It can be something.
It just has to mean something to you.
Okay.
I think myself, I hate public speaking and I get all nervous. And so that was one of the things I chose to work on.
Oh, good. Okay. You wouldn't tell, right? That she's doing awesome. Okay. So what would you tell us about, I find that, especially working women, women in leadership, have a lot of stress nowadays and pressure. And we use the word stress a lot, right? It's that S word that's used 24/7. So how would you tell them to have flow and balance in their life? Now, I say flow because honestly, with the world nowadays and the life the way it is, I think it's hard to find balance. And to me, balance is two things that are just stay stagnant, like nothing's moving. But I think flow for me means that you can go into something and go out and go in and go out kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it means to me. Like if I can put myself into something and go, but I can choose to come out of it, take a break from it, and when I'm ready, then I'll go back into it. So how would you talk about that when it comes to happiness? Because I find that that is a huge thing when it comes to stress and happiness, and kind of finding the balance between that.
Yes, well, and I think that's why it's also important to focus on those mental health practices so that you can practice those little things, and that, especially as women, I think we're socialized to take care of our families, take care of our husband, take care of our children,
Yeah.
and we can take care of ourselves as long as everyone else is taken care of. And so even when we set goals for ourselves, which is very important, is to remember to enjoy the process along the way and take care of ourselves along the way.
Okay, that is a great suggestion. So share with us what kind of strategies can you share with others out there to keep yourself going and moving forward?
Well, I think sometimes I read books and I read about suggestions and options, and I think, oh, gee, I can't do this, or, they really don't know my situation.
Right.
And so I have a lot of different options and different ideas. If you feel you can't do one thing, then there's always other options and suggestions. And so I'm really hoping that my book has a little bit of something for everyone.
Mm-hmm. Well, can you believe like we're almost to the end of the show here, and I want to talk a little bit more about your book in a sense that it looks great, by the way. I love the cover. Uh, how how can the people listening to this and watching it, how can they get a hold of your book? I know that it's just getting published.
Yes,
Okay.
I'm hoping that it should be all ready and ready for to be sold in April.
Woohoo! So this is March, so you have about a couple of weeks to go.
That's right.
And where can they get it from?
It will be on Amazon, and it'll be either a print book or an ebook, whichever you prefer.
Okay, so there you go, Amazon.com. Now, I know, Maryann, that you don't have a website. First of all, tell me, what made you want to write the book? I forgot to ask you that. So what made you want to write the book in the first place?
Well, I think self-esteem, happiness have always been very important. I've certainly struggled with it myself. And I also wrote it for my two kids. I want them to just have those words of wisdom from mom, and so that it can be a little, maybe a pick-me-up for them as well when they are experiencing difficult
That's
times.
a great gift, the gift of words and knowledge for your children. I couldn't ask for anything more. That's awesome. And something that they'll always have for their lifetime and for their kids, and to pass it on, which is amazing. Okay, so I will be putting her Amazon link on my show notes once it comes available in April. So make sure that you go onto our website. I will also put it out on my email list. So if you're not on my email list, then subscribe to zahinnanji.com. And when Maryann tells me that, yep, it's on Amazon, I will put it out on my email list, and you can get the ebook or the print book when it's out. And I hope that you will support her, and that you will read her book and read her story in the book, because it really will it will be like you're reading your own life in her book, and that's how I felt. So Maryann, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome.
It's been wonderful.
I loved how you shared the 12 pathways. Oh, and one thing I wanted to mention too is at the end of every chapter, she has some helpful hints, right?
Yes.
And then you also have quotes at the beginning of each chapter. And I like that, because sometimes when I want to pick me up, I can just go to a chapter and have a quote or a helpful hint, and I can go do that for that day, and that's my intent. So make sure that when you get this book, you have that intent as well. Okay, so until next time, this is the end of March here that you're watching this show and or listening to it on the podcast. In April, we will be doing 2 shows again. And at the end of March, I will be having an expert on mental health, and he will share his story on how he overcame his struggle with mental health. So until then, see you. Bye bye.
Thank you.